every year it seems like the Oscars gets more and more controversial, to the point some celebrities have even destroyed their careers. Hi, I'm Stacey Taylor, and today I'm counting down the top 10 celebrities who have destroyed their careers hosting the Oscars. So what celebrities do you think did a terrible job hosting the Oscars, and let us know in the comments below. Starting off our list today at number 10, we have Chris Rock. Not only did Chris Rock destroy his career in 2022 with his horrible Oscar hosting job, you think the Academy wouldn't have hired him to host the ceremony, as back in 2005 he had another pretty controversial show, as not only did he make a comment about straight black men never watching the Oscars only a month before the show, he actually tried to cover it up by stating the LGBTQ community only watches the Tonys, which would cause a handful of people to call the star out and urge the Academy to replace him as the host that year. But still, the show went on with him as the host, and to be honest, his opening monologue just wasn't even that funny, and his whole performance was just really bland and loud. And if things couldn't get any more worse, later in the night things got extremely awkward as Chris went on to make a comment about Jude Law when he said, "You want Tom Cruise, and all you get is Jude Law." The statement didn't sit well with a few people in the crowd, and when Sean Penn then took the stage to present Best Actress, he would then tell Chris Rock off and say that Jude was one of the generation's finest actors. Number 9, Anne Hathaway and James Franco. If one thing's for sure, Anne Hathaway doesn't deserve to be on this list today, but because she had to MC with James Franco and he failed at his hosting job, she unfortunately has to be on this list today. From the very beginning of the night, it looked like James just didn't want to be up on the stage, and he was waiting for the whole event to be over, which was strange, as you think the actor would have been a little more excited, as he was also nominated for an Oscar that year, but he still didn't want to be there. So to make up for his co-star's lack of energy, Anne had to try her best to keep the show afloat. Unfortunately, tipping into her over-the-top energy caused a lot of the viewers to cringe. But I still don't know what's worse, the fact that they had zero chemistry on the stage, or the fact Anne opened up the ceremony by saying, "My gosh, you're all real." Later, James would even acknowledge how bad his presence was by telling David Letterman, "I've thought about it. I think I know why I bombed. I love her, but Anne Hathaway is so energetic. I think the Tasmanian devil would look stoned standing next to Anne Hathaway." Hey my little peaches, are you liking this video so far? If so, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to that channel. Number 8, Seth Macfarlane. To be honest, I don't think any of us could really understand why the Academy would ask Seth Macfarlane to host the Oscars in the first place, as his brand of humor in his Family Guy show is very controversial. So they should have known that his performance was going to get on a lot of people's nerves. Now, Seth definitely proved that he could sing when he performed in his opening number, but he chose to do it in such a controversial way, as he decided to write a very misogynistic set that revolved around seeing actresses who have stripped down on scene for their roles, as Seth went on to sing about how he has seen certain actors' chest. He then went on to mention everyone from Meryl Streep and Naomi Watts, and you could see their faces all fall in the heartbreaking slow moment. He also enlisted an entire choir of men to help him humiliate the woman he named in his song, and when the cameras finally panned over to Charlize Theron, her unimpressed face would say it all. Not to mention, he also went on to make jokes about how women were getting themselves sick just so they could stay in shape for the award show, as well as cracking jokes about the infamous Rihanna and Chris Brown altercation, which just wasn't cool. Number 7, Ellen DeGeneres. Ellen's first Oscar hosting gig in 2007 was an utter mess, as it was nothing like the lovable performance she put on in 2014. Maybe her first time around was just missing all the selfies and pizza. However, with saying that, it isn't really Ellen's fault her performance as a host didn't do so well, as prior to hosting the Oscars, she previously hosted 3 Emmy Awards, and she did such a great job doing so. So when the Oscar ratings were down, the Academy brought in Ellen so she could bring in a different demographic, but by doing so it seems like it was just a little too forced, as she just kept rambling on and her points just fell very flat throughout the night. Even her overall style didn't seem to fit in with the Oscars, and there was a point where she even mentioned the Oscars was going green and that she was going to recycle some of her old jokes, and she actually took that to heart. It seemed like she made the night a little too much about herself and didn't really focus on the films and the actors that were up for consideration that night. Number 6, David Letterman. Letterman. It's no lie that David Letterman was at his peak in 1995, but just a couple years earlier he was actually passed over for the Tonight Show gig that was vacated at the time by Johnny Carson. So David instead went to sign his own deal for his own show on CBS, and he actually was beating Jay Leno's late night ratings by a decent margin, so he became the perfect choice to lead the Oscars, well, after both Whoopi Goldberg and Billy Crystal declined to host the event first. Now, David has always had this very dry sense of humor, and it didn't exactly translate well when he was hosting the Oscars. With his opening monologue being extremely boring, to listening to Uma Thurman and Oprah's opening skit was also just very odd and out of place to watch. David just couldn't get his style of work to fit in the right way like Johnny Carson did before him. It also didn't help that he also told the audience at one point to pay attention. At the end, David took all the heat he was receiving in stride, and he even went on to make fun of himself when he returned to his regular job by saying the Oscars even asked him to perform again. Crazy. Number 5, we have Chevy Chase. Hopes were definitely high when Chevy Chase was asked to host the 1988 Oscars, as the year prior he shared the stage with Goldie Hawn and Paul Hogan. And he did such an amazing job, so you would think that he would be able to host the award show by himself, but that just wasn't the case. Now, you know when a host opens a show saying, "Good evening, Hollywood phonies," you're definitely not in for a good night. And it just seems like Chevy, as the host that night, just kept dragging it on, and everyone watching was just praying it would all be over soon, especially when he realized his jokes weren't funny anymore and they weren't getting laughs. He just turned to this gross humor and it made us all cringe. Chevy got to the point where he was just acting completely ridiculous, like when he dropped his pants when Paul Newman took the stage to present the award for Best Actress. And when that didn't get the laughs he was hoping for, he just made some bad ad-libbing attempts, and he was seen picking his nose and sneezing into his hand, and that just wasn't funny. Number 4, Donald Duck. Now, there's probably a reason when you think of Disney characters, you never think of Donald Duck, and that's probably because he completely butchered the 1958 Oscar ceremony. So Donald Duck wasn't the only one who hosted the ceremony, as there was a handful of hosts that year, but it was Donald Duck's hosting abilities that definitely caused a huge amount of disappointment to come from viewers watching the show. So 1958 was a big year for the Oscars, as this was the first time the show had ever been broadcasted live. The Academy also sponsored the event, so that meant there was no commercials, meaning they had to hire multiple hosts as nobody really had the time to take a break. Being that there was already 5 other hosts, you would think they would be able to handle things on their own, but the Academy was still trying to figure out how to throw something extra in there for us, so they decided Donald Duck. Maybe it's because they felt like they owed the fictional character a spot due to him being a former Oscar winner, or maybe they were just a little ahead of their time and wanted to get edgy by featuring a host who doesn't wear pants. But honestly, they probably should have known better, and it would have gone better if Mickey hosted the event instead. Number 3, Rob Lowe. After Rob Lowe's performance, it made a lot of sense to why the Academy decided to stick to a host-free format for years, as it was an attempt to make sure other award shows didn't turn out to be a complete nightmare like the show did in 1989. When Grease producer Alan Carr was put in charge of delivering an opening number, not only would he have Snow White in it, but also Rob Lowe. And when they took the stage, Rob would go on to sing and flirt with Snow White throughout the entire performance, but it also didn't help that he was introduced as Disney's character's blind date. Later, Disney's president, Frank Wells, would call out the Academy for this poor performance, and he would tell them that he was extremely unhappy for what they did with Snow White's character. Rob also would tell the New York Times, "Look, the Academy asked me to take the role, so I was a good soldier and did it. You can't be your own manager and agent and soothsayer. You have to take risks." But maybe you shouldn't have taken that one. Number 2, Neil Patrick Harris. In 2015, Neil Patrick Harris, who is known for his roles in the hit series How I Met Your Mother or the Harold and Kumar franchise, got a chance to host the Oscars, and honestly, his performance as an MC for the event received a lot of mixed reviews, as his abilities to do the job just wasn't that great. Now, while the star's jokes were funny, as he is funny, he kind of pushed it a little too far as he poked fun at his own career, as the star then came out in his own underwear later on in the show to spoof Birdman and show off his songs and dance skills, with some help from Anna Kendrick. But the overall performance would have critics fuming, as they thought his opening was just bland. The only thing most people actually found enjoyable to watch weren't his jokes, but more his political speeches, as they were more entertaining to watch than his skits were. And if you prefer to hear about politics more than you want to watch a skit, you know there's a problem, because let's face it, no one likes politics. And coming in number 1 today, we have Frank Sinatra. So Frank Sinatra actually had the chance to MC the Oscars twice. The first time around, he got the chance to MC the event by himself in 1963, and he did an amazing job, so it wasn't really surprising that the Academy would ask him to come back to the show to MC again, and this time he got on the stage with Sammy Davis Jr., Bob Hope, and Shirley MacLaine. However, his second time as an Oscar host was definitely a tense one, as during this telecasted event, he and his co-host faced some major controversy when filmmaker Bert Schneider read a telegram from a Vietnam diplomat. This then prompted angry viewers to send in telegrams of their own, so mid-show, after fighting with Shirley about making his own statement, Frank would take to the stage to read a disclaimer by Bob Hope, in which he said the Academy was not responsible for the political views that were expressed on the program. But when it comes to politics, sometimes it's just best not to say anything, as people take these conversations very heavily, and it drives a lot of us nuts. Well, that's it for this video, my little peaches. Just a reminder, I'm your host, Stacey Taylor, and until the next video, remember to stay juicy.